if you look at these videos, it's really kind of cool to see also how the torque prescription comes into such huge consideration. And if we look at the class 3 on the left and the class 2 on the right, I always ask myself, should we use the same prescription for both of these patients? And I would say absolutely not, but it's kind of the best that we have for the time being. And so some people might use high torque or low torque, but you still have a horrible transition between the incisors and the canines when you do that, and you've got more of an inventory management issue. And so this is why we don't fill the slot, because there's potential for significant damage if we do so, that I'll show you in just a minute. So if you think about torque right now in our appliance, I like to think of it as, this is from Sean Carlson, but he uses this analogy of walking the dog to the park, and we travel in a straight line when we walk from our house to the park, but our dog ends up on a leash going 5 or 10 times further distance just to go in the same path as we are, because we don't have good control over the dog. It's running all over the place. And so if you think about the leash as the upper and lower bounding boxes for our torque, it keeps the tooth from going too far off of the stratosphere one direction or the other, but it's not going to be necessarily a fully customized experience. And so if you think about also when you get to the park, if you're sitting at the park bench and you want to have your dog join you there, now I have to pull on the leash, spend a lot of time and energy pulling the dog right to me where I have that dog in the right position at the park bench. And if you think about orthodontics, what if we had 24 dogs? What if we had to pull in all of those dogs to the park bench where we're sitting? And this is why it takes so much longer in braces, is because we're bending wire, we're repositioning brackets in order to try and make that one-size-fits-all system really work for each individual patient. And so with digital, if we do customized treatment, we absolutely want to keep all of those teeth on a very short leash. You want to fill the slot completely, because instead of going from A to D to K to M to T to V to Z, we want to bring all of the teeth straight from A to Z, a straight path. So if you're going to customize the prescription, if you're going to spend time doing digital, you really need to make sure you're filling the slot completely. And Incognito really does this the best. If you look at all the different digital bracket systems we've used, everything from Harmony to Eclipse to No Trace Plus and Lingual Liberty, 14 different systems that we've tried, the ones that perform really well are the ones that fill the slot completely. And I think Incognito does the best at this. And from all the cases that we've treated digitally, Incognito always was the one that required the least amount of doctor input. And if you look at that patient again, I'm saying, here's an ideal setup. This is where we want the teeth to be in red when we're done. If you look at where this class 3 patient needs to be, it's a 5-degree upper incisor torque and a negative 15-degree lower incisor torque. And that prescription really just doesn't even exist today. And if you look at what would happen if we used a standard prescription in this case and then filled the archwire slot completely, especially if you look at the roots on those lower anteriors, you're going to see that you're going to either get a fenestration, a dehiscence, or some sort of root resorption as you move that lower incisor into the symphyseal cortical plate. So real potential for damage with digital and custom if you don't know what you're doing. And I always like to say this is a orthodontic only bracket system, because the diagnosis and treatment planning of these cases is more critical with digital and custom than it's ever been before. And so if you're going to do this, it's going to be a really powerful tool, but you have to be very, very knowledgeable in diagnosis and treatment planning. And what about if this class 2 patient, not only using the right prescription, but being able to change the prescription for the treatment plan that you're going to do? So if we're going to do upper premolar extraction, being able to add some additional lingual root torque to counteract the natural tipping forces to the lingual of those crowns, fantastic. And what if we're going to do a BSSO? And what we'll end up needing to do instead is decompensating the lower incisors so we can maximize our advancement. So it's a totally different prescription, even for the same patient, depending on how we're going to treatment plan that case. And then for a Herbst appliance, we'd actually probably choose something in the middle. So depending not only on the patient that you're seeing, but also on your treatment planning and how you're going to be addressing the malocclusion, we can customize our bracket for that. And so if we come back here to a one-size-fits-all system, we've only got one position that bracket can go, or that tooth can be when we put the brace on. But what if we can move the tooth forward and backward to get cusp tips and marginal ridge alignment? What if we can control the root position for every single tooth every single time? And if we get this software set up, that allows us to kind of scroll between our malocclusion model and our final occlusion model. Then we can translate that into OrthoSelect software, who's our first partnership. And what they've been able to do is this is all automated now, but this is great to show how the bracket selection. So basically you set up the case to ideal, just like you would like with an Invisalign. They're not using a prescription for Invisalign, they're actually setting the teeth where they need to go for that individual patient. And then once we get that position established, then we can go in and design the wire plane and then have the software choose which bracket belongs on which teeth. And again, we're able to get that bracket tooth interaction and adaptation. Really, really small amount of adhesive. So this is fully custom. It's just the last little bit of customization happens at the indirect bonding with the composite pad. And once you get that ideal setup, you get the bracket selected, then you just go to your 3D printer and you can print this in your office. You can have a lab print it for you. It's either the Moonray or the EnvisionTech right now. We're using a soft indirect bonding material. NextDent has one called EIBT, and then EnvisionTech has one called EIDB. It's the same material, just with a little bit different chemistry. We can print 7 arches at a time. It costs about $5 per case in resin, and it only takes about an hour to print 7 arches. Instead of just putting an upper right 6 bracket in the upper right 6, what we're doing instead is the prescription is telling us what torque we need for the molars, and then also which thickness and torque we need for all the other teeth. And so basically just look at this prescription, and instead of selecting upper right 5, we're actually selecting the right shape bracket in terms of the thickness and torque that will get us exactly the result that we planned out on the computer. So you're basically just loading bracket by bracket, making sure it seats well into the tray. And these indirect bonding trays now are just super user-friendly. They fit so well. And then we just take, once we've got that tray printed, we also just take the adhesive, just like you would for an Invisalign attachment tray. What I love about this soft tray is that we can see the contour of the tooth. And so we know how much adhesive, how much composite we need to add for each tooth, because we can actually see the outline of the tooth as we're loading the bracket with the adhesive, just like you do with an Invisalign attachment tray. And the more cases you do with this system and platform, the less flash that we've found that we've had as the assistants get better and better trained. And from there, we just take the indirect bonding tray, loaded with the adhesive and the brackets, and you can either have your staff do this, or I still like to set the initial placement myself and cure each bracket for 3 seconds. But our bonding appointment is very easy for me. It's probably the least stressful appointment I have all day. It only takes me 30 to 90 seconds, depending on if we're doing 1 arch or 2, to get all of the brackets initially set, and then I can delegate the rest. Once you've cured the adhesive and your assistants come back and cure it completely, then you just peel off the little indirect bonding tray. And this can actually be reused. So if a bracket debonds a month or 2 down the road, you can actually take a scalpel and cut the indirect bonding tray just for that one tooth, have your assistant load the bracket back in the tray, so when you actually go to repair that loose bracket, you're still going right on with the custom prescription that you planned out. And so if you think about the current workflow right now, the orthodontist bonds braces, works up in wires, we reposition, we bend wire, we reposition, we bend wire. It takes a ton of doctor time to do that last 2 things. The repositioning and wire bending takes a ton of time for us as orthodontists. Versus with digital, we do a little bit more upfront work, a 5-minute clean check. But after we have that clean check done and get the indirect bonding done, basically everything else is assistant driven. We work up in wires. If you want, you can actually do mid-course correction by printing new indirect bonding trays, and then you just work through the wires again. Or you can bend the wire if you'd like to. So it gives you kind of the option to do either one, depending on how easy the case is going to be to just finish up. The other big thing is looking at the trend with DSOs taking over orthodontics, associateships becoming a norm. Right now, the big thing with analog is that it's not standardized. So for Invisalign, my partner orthodontist and I do the same thing every time a patient comes in. We're not competing against one another because we're always working towards the same outcome, which has already been established digitally. And so when we still use braces, we'll actually undo and redo each other's bends from one visit to the next. And when we added a second doctor, our treatment time actually extended by 6 months per case on average. not because either one of us was a bad orthodontist. We're both very, very clinically, I think, technically sound. It's just that we see things in a different way. And so we'll place bends, he'll take them out, we'll place bends again, and it's just that back and forth that makes things a big challenge in terms of standardization of care. Once we get into the wire sequence, basically it's just getting the brackets in the right position with the right
So here's our
bracket,
matrix,
and then
these are the brackets that we have, and on the left-hand side of this matrix, you'll see
1925 TMA or
the
steel.
Positive torque value.
If you look at this, just kind of from upper incisor, a standpoint of following to the right wire progression,
it becomes a negative
torque
torque
value
value
for an upper canine
series of
premolar wires to your
And then
TMA
from
or
top
steel
to
wire.
bottom, the top row is our
And this is
thinnest
simply
bracket,
wire
the middle
changes to
row
get the teeth
is our
moving to the
intermediate, and the
optimal
lower row
position.
is our thickest.
So without having to bend wire,
and these
I'm
are
saving
the
a
same
ton of time
15
and
brackets
energy.
that
We
we
let the
use for
appliance
all of the
do the work
maxillary
for
teeth in
us.
front of the molar.
So
upper
instead of
premolars,
having
upper canines,
the doctor
and,
requiring
in our upper
a lot of
incisors,
intervention,
and
and
we also
the
use them on the
assistants
lower
can actually
canines
manage
and
this case.
premolars. We have a
So
narrower
the
bracket
profitability
for the
digital
lower
is
anterior
huge.
teeth.
And this is one important aspect of this whole thing is
we can cut out visits,
and that way
we
we
cover
staff
the full range
and
of
reduce
torques,
our
which is
overhead
6
while
brackets
treating
for
these
those,
cases,
and we have
it'll make us much more profitable and much more productive.
and be able to
so
increase our
again, trying to
capacity
keep our inventory
significantly.
management.
So if we can
low,
reduce the patient time in the chair,
then
and
we
more
just
than
needed
half,
6 molars
if
with
we can
variation
take
in torque only,
80% of the doctor
so with
input,
27 brackets
down for average
we're
treatment, we
able
can make
to
things
do
so much
everything
more
that
profitable for us.
a
My
stock
predictions
bracket
are
does
the
with
velocity of tooth
25 or
movement is going to
26
be way less
brackets is what
important than the
usually
acceleration of
inventory
tooth
is.
movement. So
We
things
can
like
do it with just a couple
Capella
more
and
brackets
Acceleden
actually have a
that are trying to
fully
speed up
customized
tooth
approach for
movement,
every patient.
while they might be great,
So every single
some they may
person
work, some may not.
experiences their
But
own
I think it's going to be
customization
way
for every
better for
case.
us to move
The other
the
big
teeth
things
straight
that we
from A to
did
Z
with this
in
bracket
terms of making
prescription
our
treatment
treatment
more
more
efficient
efficient
than
than
any
any
other
other
option.
option. Our
I
slot
think digital
size is
custom
not
braces,
0.8,
just
and
like
it's not
Andrew's
0.22.
replaced the zero prescription.
We actually designed the
digital
bracket
custom is going to be
to
the
fit
next tidal
optimally
wave in terms of
with a
evolution, and
1925
it'll
wire.
probably displace
We chose this
analog
because the
braces within the
1925
decade
is the most popular
And to
finishing
do
wire.
this, skills
And
that orthodontists know how to use it know its properties really well.
Digital
So
treatment planning with
we
braces,
wanted
not
to
just
have
aligners, because it
slot
is
filling
different
appliances
in terms of
we
how much
know that's
overcorrection
how
we're going to
digital
need.
works the best.
3D printing
And so
competency
that
is going to be
wire
critical,
is going to fit
and
perfectly
then
in the arch.
indirect bonding is going to be a big
Then
part
on the
of that,
right-hand
because
side
we're
of
going
the
to need
screen,
some way to
you'll see
convert
the
our
digital
bracket
treatment
notches,
like
our
retention
retention
grooves
grooves that allow us to.
And so with digital
have that
custom
indirect bonding
braces,
trade
shorter
these
treatment,
brackets better than any
and
other
better
bracket.
outcomes. They
And
don't
we
have
like
to be
a
mutually
soft
exclusive.
indirect
So many
bonding tray
things that we do
are
are
a
a
trade-off
trade-off
between
has a lot
less
of big
time
advantages, better fit, and the
and
quality of
better
the
adaptation.
outcome. But just like
These retention grooves
and
really
this
make sure that we have
prescription,
the proper torque expression.
this doesn't have to be the case. It was
And so
more
if you watch
efficient
this series
and better
of
outcomes, and I think digital
slides
custom braces,
what you'll see
are gonna
is
be
that
exactly the
if you
same
only
thing
have a
for us.
one-size-fits-all bracket,
I think it's going to be
you've got a small
allow us
premolar,
to be
you're
better
not
than
going to have
what
the
we
cusp
do
and marginal ridge
across the
aligned
board.
just right. But what this
And
will
then
let
the
it
big
you
thing
do
too is this is
actually
a tool and
move
it's
the
not a
teeth
philosophy.
digitally.
So
in
you still get your
0.1
art, you
millimeter
still get your
increments,
science.
and every
You're
half
just
millimeter
going to
it'll
get a
actually
tool that'll help
auto-populate
you
a new
better
bracket.
execute.
And so we
on
always
that plan
have
that you've developed.
the tooth
So
in the
we're
right
not
position,
trying to teach you how to
full
practice
flexibility
braces.
to move things
We're just
forward
giving you a tool to
the
allow you to
popular
do
lingual,
it in a more efficient
but
and
we'll always
effective way.
do so with
So I'd
less
like to
than
go
a
back
half
and
millimeter
amend
of
the
composite
statement that I mentioned earlier. If you put the braces in the right place, the case treats itself. We're always keeping
But I don't think
things
that's quite
adapted
right.
very, very
I
closely
think
to
we also
optimize
need
our
to
bond
make sure
strength every single
that we
time.
put
So
the right braces
really having
in
that
the right
thickness
place
variation
for the
allows
case to
us
treat itself.
to position the teeth
But it
custom,
does come back to
customarily
this,
for
the
every
sense
single
that we
patient.
do need to be excellent diagnosticians and clinicians, and treatment planning and diagnosis is going to be everything to make digital successful. And that's where I think the orthodontist is still the most important person and the only person that should be at the helm of this whole concept moving to the digital conversion. So I think it's going to just allow us to be better for our patients than we've ever been before. Better outcomes, less time and braces, less energy on our parts. And if you look at Joe Hogan's speeches to the media over the last few years, it's always been about this digital conversion. So going from analog to digital, it's not just happening in our industry, but across the board. Every time analog goes up against a digital platform, it loses. And Invisalign's efficiencies and effectiveness are getting better and better because it's custom and digital. So what we're trying to do with this bracket system is put that same power that Invisalign's customization has back in the hands of the orthodontist, because we're the ones that have the most determination and care for our patients. And having this in our hands rather than in the hands of a huge corporation, I think is going to be what's best for us and our patients going forward. So thanks so much for your time. I'm excited to present this to you guys.